Well, good morning and welcome to a new year, 2020. We welcomed Russell Westbrook back last night for a new year, and fortunately the Thunder did a good number on that, so we welcomed him back. So any citizens to be heard? I have one, if there's not any other, Mr. Drake Rice with the Oklahoma Railway Museum, and I asked him under this items from the chairman if he'd just speak a minute or two on the museum and kind of bring everybody up to date if they're not familiar with what the museum is. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, trustees. It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. We've had a very good ongoing relationship with Cotpa since about 1995, and we're continuing on. And we have a very, what we think, successful tourism addition to the city of Oklahoma City. This past year, we carried over 37,500 passengers on our railroad. We do a couple of events. The big one was the Polar Express, which just finished. It was very taxing for our volunteers. And we take the funds and reinvest in our track. We have 4 loads of ties coming. Each load is about $14,500. We'll be installing those during the next year. We did 2 movies for Netflix out there. One of them was for the Chickasaw Nation, and so we believe we provide an asset to the city, plus these people come in the city, they stay in motels, eat meals, and pay sales tax to the city of Oklahoma City, which is good. Again, if you ever have any questions, feel free to let Jason know. We'd be glad to visit with any of you at any time. You're always welcome. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, we appreciate you being here because there is an item to restate our lease agreement with the Railroad Museum, so I'm pleased that you were here. All right. Our minutes for our December meeting. Any corrections or from any of the trustees? If not, I'd have a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Consent docket, 2 items, item A and D. Jason is just going to speak briefly on those 2 items, and then we'll get to the other items. So.
Yeah, so talking about items A and B on the consent docket, item A is an approval of a grant award from Area-Wide Aging Agency of Oklahoma. And I know the trustees are familiar with our arrangement with Area-Wide and how their grant supports senior services within Oklahoma City. This is a new opportunity to really kind of expand our service area to Canadian County. And with this grant award, we will be providing non-emergency medical transportation in Canadian County. So we're looking forward to that opportunity to serve that group of residents. And then item D is really kind of a companion item to that grant award. This is an approval of agreements with Daily Living Centers, King Worldwide, Cinder Ride, and New Yellow Cab. And these are the actual transportation providers that will be providing those trips that we schedule. So the estimated cost there that you see of $45,000 will be offset by the grant that we're going to receive in item A. So just wanted to share that with the trustees that is a new area we'll be serving in the region.
Okay. And you also might make mention, as we did on item E, because that is kind of a change in policy.
Sure, yeah, item E, so this is a request from the trust to increase our open market resolution purchasing authority for OEM bus parts, original equipment manufacturer bus parts, from $200,000 to $400,000 annually. And as I've mentioned, as the chairman and I were discussing this morning, we have contracts in place that we typically use to purchase bus parts, but there are occasions when particularly aftermarket vendors can't provide parts that are only available through the bus manufacturers themselves, primarily Gillig and New Flyer. So with about 28% of our buses now rolling out of the warranty period, and the fact that we're providing more service than we really ever have with night service, Sunday service, costs for maintenance are going up. And so this will just give us the authority to be able to purchase more open market than what we had. Doesn't necessarily mean we'll spend the full $400,000, but it gives us that authority.
All right. Any questions by any of the trustees on our consent docket? Then I'd have a motion to approve the consent docket.
So moved.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Items for individual consideration. Item A is an application for surface transportation block grant for 3 different projects. And you might just brief us on that.
Yeah, so looking forward to submitting this grant. This will be a grant application for surface transportation block grant funds. We are looking forward to this submittal because last year when we submitted a grant application, and keep in mind these are all competitive grants, but last year when we submitted a grant application, we were successful in receiving a grant award, and that's going to help us buy 2 additional buses to expand our fleet. So hopefully with this grant award, we'll also see some successes leveraging STBG funds to improve transit in Oklahoma City and the region. So looking at the item itself, there's basically 3 resolutions that are attached to the memo, and those resolutions are required as part of the grant application. And each resolution coincides with a different project that we've submitted a grant for. So in summary, we have one item that will make pedestrian, if approved, we'll be able to make some pedestrian crossing signal improvements on Classen Boulevard between 42nd and 43rd Street. That particular project is categorized as a safety project under the kind of the grant rules and requirements. And so if we're awarded that project, it's actually 100% federal funds. So there's no local match to that project. I believe in total it's around $131,000, if I'm remembering correctly. The other project we're looking at is submitting a grant application for up to 9 replacement paratransit buses. Total project there is $948,000. Our local match would be $189,600. And then the final project is traffic signal priority. We've submitted a grant project for a little over, well, actually close to $1.2 million. Our local match on that amount would be $234,180. And as you know, with MAPS 4 approval, part of the transit package included traffic signal priority. And so the unique opportunity we have here with this grant is to be able to go ahead, if we get this grant, go ahead and begin at least equipping our buses with the equipment that's needed for that traffic signal priority communication, as well as a handful of intersections. So we can install the technology, begin testing it, refining it out on our bus routes in anticipation of being able to add to that with MAPS 4 funds. So it really, I believe, sets us in a position to get ahead of the planning and implementation on the bigger project.
All right, thank you. Any questions? And I'd have a motion to approve item A.
So moved.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Item B is a resolution to allow the Oklahoma City Streetcar to provide charter streetcar service, which we've had some discussion about it, but I guess they're kind of ready to roll this out. And
Yes.
Jason reminded me I took all my office on the boat this past year, so now I can get a streetcar for them and we can tour downtown Oklahoma City. So
That's right. Not to be outdone by the Oklahoma River cruises, the Oklahoma City Streetcar has come up with a charter program and policy. And so what we have for your consideration today is a resolution allowing the administrator to establish that policy and the fees for that charter service for Oklahoma City Streetcar. You have a draft of that policy included in your packet, and then in the memo you have a summary of the proposed fees that will be added to our fee schedule that is officially adopted by the trust. But we have, as we've talked about in the past, we've had a couple of successful trial runs, tested out our ability to do charters, and so now we're ready to move forward and be able to offer that as a service offering and hopefully generate some additional revenue for the system through the charters. We're looking at, in terms of rates go, a 1-hour minimum, and that 1-hour minimum would cost $375. Each additional hour is $300, and that is consistent with the pricing that we use on Oklahoma River cruises.
And if it doesn't stop, remind me of the time to take the full loop around downtown.
Yeah, it's going to be right around 45 minutes or so to take a loop around
So
town.
1 hour would cover that.
Yep.
Unless you stopped and had lunch somewhere and then they came back and picked you up or something.
Right.
All right. I think it's a great idea. Any questions by any of the trustees? Then I have a motion to approve item B. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Item C is ratifying and approving amendments 1, 2, and 3 to award a contract to Wind Construction for, well, the revised ferry landing and terminal upgrades on the Oklahoma River.
Yeah, so with approval of the addendums here and the award of contract to Wind Construction, we'll be able to move forward on constructing a new landing at the Stockyards area, so the Stockyard Landing as we refer to it. And just as a refresher, because this has been a project in the works for a little while, we were actually awarded a competitive grant back in 2018, and as part of that grant submittal and that series of projects, we looked at a new landing there at Stockyard, some improvements to Exchange, and a pavilion at Meridian. And we bid those projects. They came in over budget, so we had to go back and break that project into some smaller pieces and revise some of the plans we had. So that's why in the title of your memo there, you'll see revised landing and terminal upgrades. But we are to a point now where we can move forward with this part of the overall project, and with approval of the item, we will award construction to the lowest bidder, Wind Construction, $1,085,212.
What was the original bid? You said,
For the 3 projects combined, Jeannie, do you remember, Jeannie? Sorry, putting her on the spot.
It's all right. I can just tell you it was a broad range between 1.5 million and 1.8 million, I believe. And with our local match, our max was 1.4. So what we actually did, we took the Meridian project, moved it to another grant that we got through a formula, and went ahead and did the upgrades at Exchange, which were security upgrades, and then now we'll do the Stockyards Landing.
okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, then I'd have a motion to approve item C.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Item D, excuse me, we need a voice vote to move item D to the end of our meeting, so we'll take,
I make that motion.
yeah, I guess we do need the motion before we vote on it. All right.
Second.
Second, all right.
Yes.
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 All right, thank you. Our next item is ratification of claims and payroll. Any questions by any of the trustees on, sure was a lot of checks written this past month, but no questions, and I'd have a motion to ratify.
So moved.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Our financial reports. Item A is to receive Cotpa's schedule of revenues and expenditures for the month ended November 30th.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, anything you'd like to mention?
Yeah, I have a few comments I'd like to make. I'll try to keep them brief. We have a presentation by the Accounting Services Division to talk about the annual financial report, so I will keep my comments brief on the budget to actuals through November of 2019. So if I could direct your attention to page 2, this is the transportation operations. A couple things I wanted to point out, talked about them in the past, but I did want to direct your attention to the federal grant revenue line. You'll notice that the amount received year to date is essentially the same as what we had in the previous month. And again, just as a reminder, we are like between our formula grants. So we have one in process now that we are optimistic we'll be able to get through the system and approved by the FTA this month. which would allow us to begin drawing for reimbursements again as we get into the second half of the year. One thing to note is we did take a draw in December of roughly $297,000, so you will see that reimbursement revenue increase some on the December financials, but it will increase significantly more as we get through the second half of the year, so that we'll finish much closer to our budgeted or projected revenue amount. And then I also wanted to just also mention that we did receive our first payment from the state in December, roughly around $300,000. So when you look at that state government subsidy, you'll see we, at least through November, hadn't received any revenue to date, but that will show up in the December financials. Looking down at the expenditures, one line item there I wanted to mention was the other services and fees. It's much closer to budget than what it typically is. It's not over. I mean, we're basically within 99% of what we had projected. We did have some annual license renewals, particularly related to software that we ended up paying actually a little bit earlier in the year than what we had budgeted. So that's why that's closer to budget than what you'll normally see. Looking at the total revenues versus expenses, you'll see through 5 months of the year, we're at an operating loss of $2 million. But again, as our federal grant revenue comes in and our funding from the state comes in, we expect to turn that around, as we typically do in the second half of the year. Looking at the next page, page 3, this is our parking operation. I know I mention it every month, but it is a variance from the budget, and that is our monthly contract revenue. We're at about 91% of what we had projected, or about $100,000 less than what we had budgeted. So you would expect, if the trend continues as we get through the year, we're going to see that number climb probably to the negative, probably about $20,000 every month. But if you'll notice, looking at our total revenue versus total expenses, our operating income is still in excess of $400,000 through 5 months of the fiscal year. And then I had a few comments on the streetcar report. This is on page 6, directing your attention primarily to the expenditures. The services and fees line that you see there at 108% of budget, or about $37,000 over, that's due primarily to additional security expenses and some parts that we've had to purchase for the streetcar. The streetcar operations, the majority of the expenditure budget, this is the contract with Herzog Transit Services. When you look at the actual expenses reflected, that is only 2 months worth of expenses. And I know I've mentioned it before, but we scrutinize those invoices as they're submitted, and if there's any errors or points of clarification, I'll just say points of clarification that we need, we try to work with our contractor before we pay that. And so we have at least 2 months of invoices that we believe we've sought and received clarity on, and those will be paid very quickly. So just felt like I needed to mention that. We're not necessarily behind in paying our bills by any means. It's an ongoing process with our contractor to basically reconcile and make sure we're paying the correct amount.
All right. Any questions? Then I'd have a motion to receive item A, or financial.
Chris, may I ask a question?
Excuse me.
So, Jason, we've been providing the bus service for the city of Norman for the past few months now. Can you remind me how we're not incurring any additional expenses beyond what we're being reimbursed? Is that a fair statement?
So that is correct. The contract allows us to recover our full costs, plus about 11% markup.
For administrative costs that we incur. Okay.
And you'll begin to start seeing some of those Norman financials. We're going to break it out separate, just like we do the streetcar. So you should be seeing that next month's board meeting reflective of what has occurred through December. Because if you'll recall, last month we did a budget amendment to kind of set that Norman amount into our budget. And so we'll be able to talk about that and have some financial data on that each month. But I do want to make sure it's clear, it is a reimbursement basis. So we incur the expenses,
Right.
and then we seek payment. So you're going to see a negative amount on these, certainly see a negative amount on these first few financials. But contractually, we get back what we incur.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, sorry, David. All right, do I have a motion to approve our interim financial, first 5 months? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Okay, the trust annual financial report, Christy Jameson, Assistant Controller with the city, is going to bring us a little update on, and everybody has a copy of it at their place, so.
All right, good morning.
Morning.
As mentioned, my name is Christy Jameson. I'm one of the assistant controllers that works in the accounting services division for the city. And my team works really closely with Jason and his staff to ensure that we are appropriately recording financial transactions and that the financial statements are accurate. Today, I'm going to provide just a high-level summary of the fiscal year 2019 financial statements. The statements in front of you comply with the pronouncements that are issued by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, which is the organization that sets reporting standards and generally accepted accounting principles for state and local governments here in the United States. The financial statements for June 30th were audited by our external auditors, AGH, and they did provide an unmodified, which is a clean opinion, on the financial statements, and the audit did not identify any deficiency in the internal controls, which is good. Go ahead, one more, please. Thank you. In addition, AGH also completed the single audit for the city. A single audit is required for any non-federal entity that expends more than $750,000 in federal awarded funds, and the purpose is to ensure that the recipient is in compliance with the federal program requirements. This is a separate report from the financial statements that is issued, and it is for the city and its public trust, and it reports the federal expenditures by grant, and also the independent auditor's report is included. We did have one finding that was identified in one of the Federal Transit Authority grants. There was a clerical error that resulted in a reimbursement request exceeding documented expenses. Cotpa's financial staff identified that error prior to the fiscal year end and were able to document other eligible expenses that exceeded the overstatement, and this issue has been discussed with the FTA and has been resolved. The authority's net position for fiscal year 2019 increased $14.3 million to a total of $98.6 million, and this was primarily due to the gain that was recognized on the sale of the Santa Fe parking garage. Capital assets for 2019 decreased $8 million, or approximately 10% overall. $7.5 million of this decrease was due to the sale of the Santa Fe parking garage and the associated land that was removed from the books. We had a normal depreciation of $4.9 million, as well as some bus retirements in the amount of $641,000. This was offset by expenditures on several projects. $300,000 was for completion of the renovations at the Sheridan Walker parking garage. We also had $2.9 million of expenditures in fiscal year 19 for the CNG upgrade at the maintenance facility. And we also had $1.8 million of A&E expenses for the new convention center garage. At June 30, the outstanding revenue bonds were $18.9 million. This was down approximately $635,000 from 2018 due to regularly scheduled debt payments. And the bond ratings at June 30 were AA2 for Moody's and AA plus for Standard & Poor's, which is very good. Subsequent to the date of the financial statements, in September, a portion of the proceeds from the sale of the Santa Fe garage were placed in an escrow account to defease the Series 2013 revenue bonds, and in October, the authority issued its Series 2019 revenue bonds in the amount of $13.8 million to finance a portion of the convention center garage. Overall, for 2019, operating revenues did decrease $1.6 million to a total of $10.3 million for the year. Operating expenses increased $5.8 million, and this was primarily due to an increase in personal services of $2.5 million and an increase in maintenance expenses of $2.7 million. Net non-operating revenues increased $8.1 million due to a $5 million increase in payments from the city and a $3 million increase in operating grant revenues. Capital contributions decreased $3.3 million for the year, and this was primarily due to the fact in the prior fiscal year we had received a capital grant to fund purchases of new buses that we did not receive in the current year. On pages 18 and 19 of the financial statements, you will see the Cotpa Retirement Trust financials. And overall, the net position for the retirement trust, restricted for pension benefits, increased $561,000. For the year, employer and plan member contributions increased $62,000, and investment income for the year decreased $118,000. So just in summary, overall, the net position for both the authority and the Cotpa Retirement Trust increased over the prior year, and the bond ratings are considered high quality and low credit risk, so all positive things. And I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Christy, on the revenue and expense slide,
Yes.
where you mentioned the $1.6 billion in decreased revenue, I believe we identified that primarily for the Santa Fe garage?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so tied to our parking revenues. And then I just wanted to make a point of clarification on the single audit. So it's resolved from the standpoint of a single audit and the work our auditors did. We have notified the FTA, and so we expect some probably additional dialogue with the FTA.
All right. Any questions? We've got a lot of accounting minds on this board, so, but they've looked at it, so I'm sure. So. All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right. I would have a motion to receive item B, our annual financial report. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. All right, our program reports. Streetcar report. Jesse?
Good morning.
Morning.
Welcome to 2020. All right, so early December, OKC Streetcar and Embark participated in our annual audit with ODOT. So December 3rd and December 4th, we met with ODOT and their consultant Dovetail at their facilities there, and they basically came in and did an audit of our documents. And then we also went out and looked at several items along the route, and so that's one of the things that we looked at here. So I'm sure you're all aware that Oklahoma City has many tunnels underground, and so the streetcar actually crosses over one of those tunnels on Hudson. And so we went out and did an inspection of the reinforcing and the bracing in that tunnel. It is common to find Eugene in a corner sometimes, so that's what's going on here. But no, we're actually looking at all of the bracing and stuff that was installed. So back in October, we brought the PTASP or the SSPP to the board for approval, and since then we've been working to revise that up to the PTASP requirements, and we plan to submit that document back to ODOT on February 3rd of this year. And then between February 3rd and June 5th, we'll be working with ODOT, going back and forth with review and comments, bringing that document up to make sure that it meets all the FTA requirements and that we're able to meet the 49 CFR 673 compliance by July 20th of 2020. So be looking forward to that June 5th date where we'll be bringing that PTAS document to the board.
Jesse?
Yes, sir.
While you're on that slide, you had mentioned working with ODOT to do the audit back in December, I guess it was. Talk If you could, talk a little bit about how that audit is really going to give us a lot of direction on what we have to do for PTAS.
Right.
To meet the requirements of the PTAS.
You bet. So during that audit, we discussed several items that are required in the program standard, and also some of the requirements that they're going to look for in the PTAS. And so we're taking those items back, and staff and the safety group will be implementing those requests and items into our PTAS document.
So we're going to expect a lot of input from ODOT, but it's going to mostly, we think, be geared towards this is what is required to get ready for the July 20th, 2020 date. And we're, as we've advised the trust in the past, that's what we've been working to all this last year. So.
Yep. Thanks. All right. So December, we had a lot of events going on. So one of those events was Streetcar Story Time with Mrs. Claus. This was a really awesome event that Michael and his group helped put on. And so essentially what happened was you could purchase tickets, and then you bring your ticket to the Santa Fe hub, and inside you'd have milk and cookies, and Mrs. Claus would be there, and you could take pictures with Miss Claus. And then the staff would escort the people across the street and pick up the streetcar there on E.K. Gaylord. So Miss Claus and her elves would escort people across the street. They'd board the streetcar. They'd do a full loop, and during that time, Miss Claus with her big giant Christmas chair would sit there and read the Polar Express and Santa Comes to Oklahoma City. It was a pretty awesome event.
Was it pretty well attended?
It was, yeah, for sure. We had we canceled a couple of events because of lack of attendance, but for the most part, it was pretty well attended. Also during December, we also had the Sip and Savor with Elk Valley event. So essentially, you would purchase a ticket, and you would ride the streetcar to 5 different restaurants, and they would Elk Valley would pair a beer with an appetizer at that restaurant, and then you would essentially complete a full loop, and then you'd go back to Elk Valley Brewing, where you could enjoy a full pint of beer, and then also get a commemorative mug. And then also...
Sorry. How are events like this going? These sort of like pub crawl?
Going really, really well.
I would imagine, yeah. So just wanted to check in with you. Thank you.
Yeah, full attendance for sure, yeah.
Did the streetcar then take everybody home?
Exactly, yeah. Also, so obviously December 14th was our 1-year anniversary. We coincide with Christmas events and downtown December events. And so one of the things that we had was Gingy and the Grinch on board the streetcar. And then we also had a booth set up at the ballpark stop, and where we were handing out gifts and things. And then also you could have those gifts wrapped in the Homeless Alliance wrapping paper. So we also partnered with Uncovering Oklahoma to showcase the downtown December activities. So she essentially rode the streetcar to all the downtown December activities and had a blog about it. Pretty awesome. And we also partnered with I-8 Oklahoma, and so sponsored this blog where he would go to different restaurants and stuff. So this one here was the Oklahoma Museum of Art, where he went and reviewed the brunch. So hopefully you'll be hungry for lunch now, if you're taking a look at that. Also, in December, we ran through our free weekends. Again, so we had free ridership or free rides Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays in December, and we wrapped that up January 5th. So this is, I mentioned earlier, the curbside wrapping paper. So this is one of our streetcars wrapped in that curbside wrapping paper. Again, we also had St. Anthony's Hospital. Dr. Kevin Lewis had his program on board the streetcar, and so some of the programs that was discussed on board the streetcar was hearing loss, pneumonia vaccine, and then he also discussed the St. Anthony blood drive on December 20th. As always, I love to bring the Love the Loops videos to you guys, so we released Kitchen 324 in the Melting Pot in December. always. Michael and his group do an excellent job. And then also, New Year's Eve, we, Embark and Oklahoma City Streetcar offered free services on New Year's Eve, and we ran until 2 a.m. on New Year's Eve for the streetcar.
What was that like? Like, was ridership pretty high that late in the evening like that?
Perfect segue, yes.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, so December, we saw very high ridership. So New Year's Eve, on the far right there, was 4,262 riders. Previous New Year's was just a little over 4,000, so we actually beat our first New Year's Eve ridership. That was great. You can see the big uptick there on the weekends, on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays when we offered free service. And then also a pretty good uptick in December ridership, just in general. Yeah. So total ridership for December was 43,185. Yep.
Who else? I know Kansas City. How many other cities in the U.S. provide just 365 free streetcar service?
Right. So Kansas City is free. Milwaukee is sponsorship free. So they had a casino that sponsored their free ridership. And then Cincinnati is working to go to a free system. Right now they're a pay system, but they're working to go to a free system.
In Cincinnati, are they looking toward a sponsorship model or a sales tax or property?
Yeah, they're looking at a bid district, kind of like what Kansas City has.
District.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet. So I'm going to jump back one slide here just to show our monthly ridership over the course of the year. So our average ridership for the full year was 33,458. Our average daily ridership over the course of the year was just a little over 1,300. Our average weekday ridership, 853. And then our average weekend ridership was just a little over 1,600. All right. So moving on. So fare compliance. So, we track our fare compliance every month. And you can see our average there is about 95.6% fare compliance. I do want to draw your attention to December. So you can see the inspection percentage on the far right there is 6.7%. So the reason for that is because we were free on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, right? So the way we figure that inspection percentage is you take the total ridership and the total inspections and you get your percentage. So that's why that's a little lower. We try to strive to be right at 10%. You can see that our average inspection percentage is 9.6% over the course of the year. All right, total blockages by month. We saw a slight uptick in December. That's anticipated with more and more people being downtown. But you can see our total blockages for the entire year is just a little over 1,200 blockages. All right, that's all I have. It's not January 10th, 2019. It is 2020. Any questions?
How long does it take to normally clear a blockage?
Right, so...
And is a blockage actually stop the streetcar?
Right, so a typical blockage is anywhere from 2 minutes to it can be up to 20 minutes, depending on what typically happens is the streetcar is blocked and we'll pull up and we'll start blowing our horn trying to get someone's attention that, oh yeah, maybe I did park over the line. And what typically happens is they'll run out and they'll move their car. If that doesn't happen, during that time, the streetcar operator is radioing the control center, and we'll send a supervisor out regardless, right? And so the supervisor usually gets there within 4 to 5 minutes max, and then they'll call for PD assistance, and then they'll start looking for the owner of that vehicle. And so, the longest time is if we actually have to tow the vehicle, and that can take up to or a little over 20 minutes. And sometimes we get blocked by emergency vehicles also. So the police are really good about if they come up on the scene and they park on the tracks, they realize that they've parked on the tracks and they'll move. But IMSA and fire, they see it as life and limb, and so they get as close to the person as they possibly can. And sometimes that means they park on the tracks and they won't move until they load that person or they clear the scene. And so sometimes we get blocked by emergency vehicles also.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Well, it's been a pretty successful year.
It's been a great year, yes.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Parking system report. We're coming out of the ground.
I'm sorry?
We're coming out of the ground.
We are. First, I'll talk a little bit about some boring stuff. Our public parking signs fabrication for all of the garages are under fabrication. Installation will begin later this month and hopefully conclude before the end of February, as we committed to. We did have a small stumbling block with the permits, some miscommunication. So next month we'll be bringing hopefully final acceptance to you and a no-cost change order for the delay that we occurred. The SCADATA hardware and software upgrade, overall that's going well. We have 3 separate projects kind of going on that fit together. We have a new convention center, parking garage, equipment, a new surface lots, parking equipment, and then what we currently own and operate. From SCADATA's perspective, it's 3 separate projects that don't mingle well from their paperwork perspective. In order to save time, effort, and efficiencies, staff has provided directions that we want to software-wise set up all of these systems into our software umbrella at the same time and do the testing of those devices and the software all at once. Unfortunately, due to internal controls at SCADATA, there's been some software licensing stuff that we're working out. We believe all of that will be worked out by the end of the month, and then mid to late February, staff will start testing. Factory acceptance test and system acceptance test are fancy ways of saying, does the ticket function properly for the customer? Does it get charged properly for the customer? Do the gates open when they're supposed to? Does the customer get the proper change? And is everything, importantly, is everything reporting properly on our system? Very time-consuming and methodical process, but we're going to do that in a warehouse setting versus putting the equipment out into the lanes and letting the customers use it and then finding those problems and then their solutions. The last test is lane acceptance test, and that's basically we put the equipment into the garages and then make sure the gate goes up and the gate goes down and behaves. Nothing changed from a warehouse environment to the garage. Really excited about the reporting component and the benefits to the customers on that system upgrade. Got some parking garage pictures to show you. We have had substantial progress since the last meeting. Here's a footing being built. There's a pier cap right there. Again, you can see how deep all that rebar and concrete is by just looking at the man standing in the hole. This is a wall for our underground basement being built right now. Continuing to be built and being poured. Here we have a rebar for a column coming in. It's being placed over the column pier. Temporary securing of it. The concrete form put around it, and then concrete being dumped into the hole. Here's our basement walls. You can see the black material is the waterproofing of the basement walls so that water doesn't seep inside of the garage. Here's a small picture of us building the first deck of the garage that's going above the basement area. A beam being flown in from using the crane. Men working in the basement with the forms. Now we're in the basement. You can see the beams and the ceiling of the form. This picture, I have to tell you, is about 48 hours old, so we probably have a lot more built for our pour for the basement. First floor covering the basement area only. This dirt area between the columns and the first floor in the basement, that'll obviously be parking, but we'll pour that here in a couple of weeks. Our elevator shaft, you can see the first floor. What appears to be a wooden box basically is a wooden box. It forms the opening for the elevator cabs, but we've made substantial progress on that. Again, here's the second floor being built, second floor being poured, the forms being removed from the second floor, pushed up to the third floor. Third floor's complete, fourth floor's complete. And we are currently on schedule to complete for substantial completion at the end of October, final completion 1st of December. I will forewarn you that there's going to be a change order next month. We've had several items that have come up that needed to be addressed, and we'll roll several items up into one change order for your approval next month. Do we have any questions?
Well, boy, it's moving along from once we had the groundbreaking.
It's moved fast. Weather's been good to us.
Yeah. All right.
Knock on wood.
Thank you. Our last program report is the River Cruises and Spokies report. Junior?
Good morning.
Morning.
Well, we had some interesting developments that caused some major cancellations. I learned a new term, fine-grained clastic particles, silt. So when we had the heavy rain, tremendous amounts of silt emptied into the May Basin and the Western Basin, the westernmost part of the Western Basin, and caused us to have to shut down service to Meridian. So what we did instead for that first trip that normally goes from Exchange to Meridian, we just went to Regatta Park instead so that we could still have the same number of operating hours and still be able to serve some customers, though we were not able to serve those hotel customers out at Meridian during most of the year. So the result is a record number of cancellations, despite the fact that we rerouted. The previous high cancellation years that occurred prior to 2014 were due to infrastructure failures, dam failures, gate failures, those sorts of things. We've had very, very little of that since 2014 with the work that Public Works has been doing to keep that going. The cancellations in 2015 were due to high river flows and debris from heavy rain. So while we like rain, we like water, we'd like it spread out a little more evenly through the year, maintain our schedules. 2019 started out really strong. It looked like it was going to be a good year over the prior year, had it not been for the rain in May and June, and we did have a brum lock failure in September. We are confident that ferry service schedule that we currently have been operating is efficient and it's effective under the existing budget. The focus in 2020 will be on growing charter service, which suffered this past year. Riders per service hour, you see we saw some growth from 2018 to 2019. Now, the drop in 18 and 19 from previous years is because we shifted evening ferry service, which had very high ridership, to a specialty cruise so that we could bring in a little more revenue during those high ridership hours. And that's been helping considerably to grow the revenue that supports the ferry service. So to see an increase from 18 to 19 kind of makes us think we made the correct choice there to sacrifice ferry ridership in favor of revenue to support the system. On Spokies, ridership on Spokies was down 41% in December compared to 2018. The weather really hasn't been bad. It's mostly the competing modes that you see out there on the street They appeared in fall of 2018, are contributing factors to our decline in 18 and 19. We are investigating the introduction of e-bikes, which we think will help grow our ridership. We have a test coming in March with some e-bikes. Now, an e-bike, while you're pedaling, you can get some motor assist. It's not like a scooter or a motorcycle. You have to be pedaling to get the assist, but we think that'll help grow our ridership. It'll be a little more fun to ride, but certainly not as hazardous as riding a fully motorized vehicle. Most of our ridership is on the weekends, which we expected. We have some commuters. We have about 10 people who use it on a regular daily basis. They're annual members or recurring monthly members. We had another 8 to 10 recurring monthly members on top of that. And they ride, maybe they live in one of the apartments somewhere in the metro area, and they use Spokies to get to work or other destinations around town. We have a couple that don't even have a car. They just use Spokies exclusively. And we're very happy to have those riders. And that, of course, affects when ridership by day, by time of day. Most of the rides are evenings on the weekends, which I think is typical since a lot of our riders are visitors to Oklahoma City. And with that, and marketing has been working to help us make the distinction between how to ride our classic Spokies bikes, which are at stations, and how to ride the dockless bikes, how to check those out, since they are a little bit different. The pricing's the same, but there is a slight difference in how you check them out and where you need to leave them. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Is it my imagination, or weren't we trying to, or some way monitoring the scooters some way, or is that just my imagination?
No, we are monitoring the scooters. Scooter ridership has also suffered. They're getting less than one ride per scooter per day this time of year. But I think that's expected. Their highest ridership in December was on Christmas Day and New Year's Eve. The rest of the month, they really had pretty low ridership. We are monitoring how many scooters they have in the area. They're limited to 350 in the urban core, and then they're allowed additional scooters, which they've licensed another 108 to go at our bus shelters, but they have to be outside the urban core. Those are having extremely low ridership, though they're going to try and license a few more of those shelter areas to hopefully get them in some areas where they could get some ridership.
All right. Any questions? Thank you. I would have a motion to receive our program reports then.
So moved.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Any items from the trustees before we go into executive session?
Yeah. Reading, there's a line in our report, what do we call this officially? The annual financial report, where it talked about the economic factors contributing to where our finances are, and it says, quote, "The Transportation Division continues to follow a nationwide trend of decreasing ridership due to lower unemployment and rising wages that make owning and operating a car more affordable." And so I did some sleuthing on Google and came across a Washington Post article to kind of dig into these numbers. So I find this very concerning. And like the scooters, adding competition to bikes, you see Uber and Lyft pulling, I'm quoting now from the article, Uber and Lyft pulling people off trains and buses at record levels. Researchers concluded factors such as lower fuel costs, increased teleworking, higher car ownership, contributing to this sort of stuff. I'm worried about this, though, because, in fact, I'm not the only one. I'm seeing words like raises alarm and emergency from transit advocacy folks. But, and this is a quote from Jarrett Walker, who's a transit planner in Houston. Quote, "When we don't share space efficiently, we get in each other's way, and that is a problem for the livelihood, the viability, the livability, and the economy of a city. It means more traffic and more congestion." But there were exceptions to this decline, and that was Seattle, Phoenix, Houston, and I'm quoting again, which either expanded transit coverage and boosted service or underwent ambitious network overhauls, as in Houston's case. In 2015, the Houston bus system transformed overnight from a traditional hub-and-spoke design focused on downtown to a grid that apportioned equal service to other parts of the city. In the aftermath of the redesign, the system saw significant weekend ridership gains and quelled a trend of dramatic losses that included losing a fifth of its ridership over a little more than a decade. So I know it's a little early in the morning for existential conversations about the state of public transit, but I just wanted to put that on everyone's mind if it's not already. I'm guessing a lot of us up here are thinking about that. But I would just challenge us as we move toward the implementation of maps over the next decade, and as we move in toward the implementation of our city's first bus rapid transit system, that we really do use our imaginations and think outside of the world as it is right now in this city. And I know sometimes these are uncomfortable conversations, but when a place like Houston can transform overnight the way that they did their entire system, I just think we got to think about that, because otherwise the congestion and the sort of things we heard earlier are going to be at our doorstep.
All right. Okay. Vote? All right. Then do we need a motion to go into the executive session, or we've already done that? Okay, thank you.
Yes, you should. Stay out of the storms and snow and whatever else happens.